This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
I want you to just picture your morning routine for a second.
Oh, sure.
You stumble out of bed, you walk into the bathroom, and eventually you turn around, push a little silver button or pull a handle, and you just watch.
Right, the miniature whirlpool.
Exactly. You get that little whirlpool in the bowl, you hear the rush of water, and whatever was in there simply vanishes. Out of sight, out of mind.
Whisked away to some invisible subterranean world.
Yeah. It basically feels like a fundamental law of physics in the modern world, right? Like gravity pulls things down, pipes take our waste away, and we never have to think about it again.
We really do take that magic trick completely for granted.
We do. But I want to pose a question to you, to the listener. What if the infrastructure behind that simple, thoughtless flush just disappeared tomorrow?
Oh, wow.
Or, to look at it from a much harsher angle, what if it never existed for you in the first place?
Well, the thing is, for a massive portion of the human population, that isn't some hypothetical thought experiment. It is simply their morning routine. We're just so accustomed to the luxury of that silver button that we forget it relies on a sprawling, highly engineered, and incredibly fragile system.
Which is exactly what we're going to get into today.
Exactly. What we are exploring today is how that invisible infrastructure, the systems we rely on to separate ourselves from our own biological waste, is currently buckling under immense pressure.
Yeah, it's highly unequal.
Highly. And the cracks in the system are really starting to show in ways that affect global health, economics, and obviously the environment.
So today we are taking a deep dive into the state of global water and sanitation. We're relying on these massive, comprehensive data reports from the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the United Nations.
A lot of heavy reading.
So much reading. But our mission is to pull back the curtain on this massive global blind spot. But before we even get into the numbers, I feel like we have to address the elephant in the room. Or maybe the smell in the room.
Yeah, the squeamishness factor.
We have this profound psychological aversion to discussing human waste. We use euphemisms like, going to the restroom or using the facility.
Right. We actively train ourselves from childhood to look away and just never speak of it.
But that psychological squeamishness is a huge part of the problem, isn't it?
It absolutely is. When an entire global society decides a topic is too impolite for a dinner conversation, well, it also becomes too impolite for high-level political discourse.
And budget allocations.
Exactly. That silence has allowed this monumental failure of public health and infrastructure to just persist in the background.
So we have to get comfortable talking about it.
We do, because if we're going to understand why giving everyone a toilet isn't actually enough, or how climate change is literally bringing our buried waste back to the surface.
This is a terrifying visual, by the way.
And why human waste might actually be a massively valuable untapped resource, we just have to get comfortable talking about the mechanics of sanitation.
Okay, so let's strip away the euphemisms and look at the sheer scale of what we are dealing with here.
Let's do it.
The data from the UN and the WHO reviews a crisis that is honestly almost difficult to wrap your head around. As of 2024, they report that 3.4 billion people lack safely managed sanitation.
3.4 billion.
That's roughly 40% of the entire human population on Earth. And adding to that, 2.2 billion people lack safely managed drinking water.
Right.
And 1.7 billion people don't even have basic hygiene services at home, meaning they literally don't have a dedicated place to wash their hands with soap and water.
It's staggering. When you look at those figures, you realize that if you gathered everyone who lacks safely managed sanitation into one place, you would have the largest civilization in human history.
Wow.
Yeah, an entire civilization entirely unequipped to safely handle their own biological output.
And within those broader statistics, there's an even sharper reality, right?
There is. The reports highlight that 419 million people still practice what the UN categorizes as open defecation.
So let's paint a picture of what open defecation actually means on the ground because, the terminology sounds so clinical.
It does.
We are talking about 419 million people.
Mm.
That's more than the entire population of the U.S. and Canada combined.
Easily.
People who have absolutely no access to a toilet, a latrine, or, even a bucket.
Right.
Every single day, they are forced to step outside their homes and find a street gutter, go behind some bushes, or walk out into an open field or a local river just to go to the bathroom.
And that daily reality creates an immediate, highly localized biological hazard for the entire community.
Yeah.
And the danger of that hazard is magnified exponentially when you look at another crucial data point from those UN
The
reports.
water scarcity.
Exactly, the absolute scarcity of the resource we rely on to dilute and manage all this waste. The UN points out that only 0.5% of the water on Earth is usable and available freshwater.
Just half of 1%. I was really trying to visualize that because percentages can feel very abstract.
It's hard to picture.
So imagine the Earth's total water capacity as a standard-sized bathtub, completely full to the brim.
Okay, full bathtub.
If you take out the salt water in the oceans and the water locked up in polar ice caps and glaciers, plus the water trapped in completely unreachable underground aquifers,
What's left?
the usable 0.5% of fresh water that we actually rely on, that is just half a teaspoon of water sitting next to that giant bathtub.
Half a teaspoon. And every single terrestrial life form, every human, every agricultural field, and every industrial process is entirely dependent on that half teaspoon.
It's insane. So now imagine 8 billion people crowding around that single half teaspoon, fighting over it to drink, to water their crops, and run their factories.
Right.
And while that intense competition is happening because of this massive deficit in sanitation infrastructure we just talked about, we are carelessly spilling our untreated biologically hazardous waste directly into that exact same half teaspoon.
Directly into it. That contamination is happening at a staggering scale. And, to understand how it happens, we have to look very closely at how organizations like the WHO and UNICEF define their terms.
Because the language can be tricky.
Very tricky. The language they use often masks a massive infrastructural chasm. There is a very distinct line drawn between what they call basic sanitation and safely managed sanitation.
Which, I'll admit, I assumed basic sanitation just meant the problem was mostly solved. Like, you have a toilet with a door, you have privacy, you aren't practicing open defecation anymore.
And that is the common assumption. But basic sanitation only guarantees that you have access to a private facility, like a simple pit latrine or a toilet, that separates your waste from human contact in that immediate physical moment.
So it provides dignity and privacy.
Exactly. But the definition of basic sanitation literally stops at the floorboards. It says absolutely nothing about what happens to that waste after it leaves the bowl or falls into the pit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. According to the data, 4.2 billion people, so over half the world's population, use sanitation services that leave human waste entirely untreated.
Okay, let me unpack this. So you might have a private latrine, but if that latrine is just a pipe that dumps directly into an open municipal drain,
Or into a local river, yeah.
then the biological threat hasn't been neutralized at all.
Yeah.
You've essentially just relocated the hazard from your backyard to the communal water supply.
Exactly. Or consider a poorly constructed pit latrine. If it isn't properly lined or if it's dug in an area with a high water table, the raw sewage slowly leaches out into the surrounding soil.
Just seeping into the ground.
Right. It percolates downward and contaminates the groundwater aquifers that the community relies on for their drinking wells.
So what actually counts as safely managed then?
Well, safely managed sanitation, which only 57% of the global population had in 2022, by the way, requires the waste to actually be treated. Meaning the infrastructure must transport the waste to a treatment plant or contain it in a properly designed, sealed septic system where the pathogens are biologically neutralized in situ before the water is allowed to re-enter the environment.
Okay, so when over 4 billion people are using systems that merely hide the waste rather than treating it, that untreated sewage flows inevitably back into that half teaspoon of fresh water we all share.
Unfortunately, yes.
And when that polluted water makes its way back into the human body, we are no longer just talking about an environmental accounting error. We're looking at a biological catastrophe.
A massive one.
The reports state that 1.4 million people die every single year as a direct result of inadequate drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, what the development sector refers to as WASH.
WASH, yes. Water, sanitation, and hygiene. And to break that down further, of that 1.4 million, unsafe sanitation specifically accounts for 564,000 deaths annually.
That's just.
We are talking about over 500,000 people dying entirely preventable deaths simply because their environment is contaminated by human feces.
The demographic breakdown of those deaths is what really struck me in the reports.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. The WHO highlighted that in the year 2019 alone, Better water, sanitation, and hygiene could have prevented the deaths of 395,000 children under the age of 5.
Just let that sink in.
Nearly 400,000 toddlers and infants lost in a single year, predominantly to diarrheal diseases.
Diarrheal diseases are vicious in communities without treated water. When we talk about cholera, for instance, we are talking about a highly aggressive bacterial infection.
Right.
The Vibrio cholerae bacteria enters the body through contaminated water. And once in the small intestine, it produces a toxin that essentially hijacks the cells lining the gut.
Hijacks them how?
By forcing them to rapidly dump massive amounts of water and electrolytes directly into the intestinal tract. A person with severe cholera can lose up to 1 liter of fluid an hour.
1 liter an hour?
Yes. Without rapid rehydration, it can be fatal within hours.
That's terrifying. Now, the source material also lists several other diseases linked to poor sanitation, like dysentery, typhoid, and polio. But it also mentions a category called neglected tropical diseases, or NTDs, and specifically lists schistosomiasis.
Ah, yes.
Now, I know trachoma is a bacterial eye infection that can lead to blindness, but what exactly is schistosomiasis, and how does a lack of a toilet spread it?
Well, schistosomiasis perfectly illustrates the terrifying life cycle of waterborne parasites. It is caused by parasitic flatworms.
Okay.
When an infected person urinates or defecates in a freshwater source like a lake or a slow-moving river, they release the parasite's eggs into the water.
Gross, but okay, I follow.
Those eggs hatch and infect specific types of freshwater snails.
Wait, snails?
Yes, snails. The parasite multiplies inside the snail and is then released back into the water as a free-swimming larva called a cercaria.
So the snail is essentially acting as an incubator for the parasite.
Yes, and here is where it becomes an absolute nightmare for the local population. If you walk into that water to bathe, to wash your clothes, or just to fish, those microscopic larvae can actively penetrate human skin.
Oh my God.
You don't even have to drink the water. Just wading into it is enough.
That is the stuff of nightmares.
It is. Once inside the body, the larvae migrate to the blood vessels of the intestines or the bladder, mature into adult worms, and begin laying thousands of eggs.
Which I assume does terrible things to your body.
It causes massive organ damage, chronic pain, and eventually, if untreated, death. And the entire cycle begins all over again when the infected person is forced to use the environment as a toilet.
Well, you are completely trapped by the environment you live in. But, the physical toll goes even further than these acute infections.
It does.
The reports emphasize a deep connection between poor sanitation and chronic malnutrition. And I always assumed the link was simply, if a child has constant diarrhea, they become dehydrated and just lose whatever nutrients they just consumed.
And that acute loss is definitely a factor, but the reality is much more permanent and deeply structural. The chronic exposure to fecal pathogens causes a condition known as environmental enteropathy.
Environmental enteropathy. What is that exactly?
Let's look at the cellular level of the human gut. The lining of a healthy small intestine is covered in microscopic finger-like projections called villi, and even smaller ones called microvilli.
Okay.
Their job is to create a massive surface area to absorb nutrients, vitamins, and minerals from the food we eat.
So they basically act like a highly efficient sponge, right? Just soaking up calories.
Exactly like a sponge. But when a child is living in an environment with chronic open defecation, they are constantly ingesting low levels of fecal bacteria.
From dirty hands or contaminated food.
Right, or unwashed toys. Their body is in a perpetual state of fighting off these invaders. And this constant immune response causes severe chronic inflammation in the gut.
And what does the inflammation do?
It physically damages that intestinal lining. The villi become blunted, flattened, or completely destroyed.
So the sponge is essentially smoothed over. It loses all its surface area.
The gut physically changes shape and loses its ability to function. So even if an international aid organization comes in and provides that child with high-quality, nutrient-dense food,
the child's body physically cannot absorb the calories or the vitamins.
Exactly. They remain chronically malnourished despite eating. This leads to physical stunting.
And stunting isn't just about a child being shorter than average for their age, is it?
No, it means their brain doesn't develop fully. Their cognitive potential is permanently capped, their immune system remains compromised, and their future capacity to learn and work is drastically reduced.
So a lack of plumbing is literally stunning the brain development of millions of children.
It is. The sheer loss of human potential is staggering.
It really is. And the societal impacts cascade outward from there. The UNICEF report spends a significant amount of time detailing how poor sanitation destroys human well-being and social development, with a very specific focus on the disproportionate impact on women and girls.
Yes, that's a huge component.
It mentions high levels of anxiety, the risk of sexual assault, and lost opportunities for education.
Because the logistical reality for a woman or a teenage girl living in a community with no private toilets is harrowing.
I can't even imagine.
To maintain any sense of privacy or dignity, they often have to wait until dark to walk out into a field, a forest, or an open defecation area.
Which means holding it all day.
Right. And the psychological toll of holding it in all day causes severe anxiety and physical health problems like urinary tract infections. Furthermore, walking alone in the dark to these isolated areas makes women and girls highly vulnerable to harassment and sexual assault every single night.
This is an impossible situation. And the logistics of just going to school are equally compromised, right?
Yeah.
I was reading this section on how a lack of safe, separate sanitary facilities in schools directly correlates with female dropout rates.
It's a direct pipeline. Once a young girl hits puberty and begins menstruating, the physical environment of the school determines her future.
Yeah.
If there is no private, clean toilet with a way to safely dispose of sanitary products and wash her hands, she simply cannot manage her period at school.
So the shame, the stigma, and the sheer logistical impossibility just force millions of girls to stay home for a week every month.
Exactly. And eventually they fall so far behind in their coursework that they drop out entirely. But the flip side is when you provide separate, safe, and clean sanitation facilities in schools, female attendance rates absolutely skyrocket.
That's incredible.
Ensuring girls can safely manage their menstruation is actually one of the most highly effective interventions for gender equality and economic development in the world.
So female empowerment is directly tied to plumbing.
It really is.
Okay, I have to stop here, though, and ask just the most frustrating question imaginable.
Go for it.
If the death toll is 500,000 people, right? If 400,000 children are dying from preventable diseases, if parasites are burrowing into people's skin, and if girls are dropping out of school, why aren't development banks and governments just pouring concrete and digging latrines everywhere?
That's the billion-dollar question.
I mean, human beings built the London Underground, we split the atom, we put rovers on Mars. Why can't we just deploy a massive global engineering initiative to build our way out of this with traditional plumbing? What is physically stopping us from just digging holes and laying pipes?
It is the most logical reaction to seeing these numbers. And that approach building massive centralized sewer systems and sprawling concrete treatment plants is exactly how the developed world solved this problem in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Right, like Joseph Bazalgette designing the London sewer system in the 1850s to combat cholera.
Exactly. But the harsh reality is that the 19th century blueprint for sanitation is fundamentally incompatible with 21st century geographical, demographic, and atmospheric changes.
What do you mean?
The ground is literally shifting beneath our feet, making those old solutions impossible to deploy. Let's look at the immense challenge of the modern city.
Okay.
The reports highlight a massive demographic shift.
Yeah.
Rapid global urbanization. People are flooding into cities in low and middle income countries looking for economic opportunity, and they are settling in dense, informal urban areas.
Often referred to as slums.
Yes. And we are talking about places with population densities that just dwarf major Western cities. In these informal settlements, space is at an absolute premium. Homes are built side by side, stacked on top of each other, separated by alleyways barely wide enough for a person to walk through.
So you just don't have the space.
You literally cannot simply dig a hole for a pit latrine because there is no physical land available.
Okay, but even if a family somehow manages to carve out space for a pit latrine or a rudimentary septic tank beneath their home, the sheer volume of people using it must mean it fills up incredibly fast.
That is the crucial logistical failure point. A pit latrine is not a permanent solution. It is a temporary storage vessel. When it fills up with fecal sludge, it has to be emptied.
Right.
In a well-planned city, a vacuum truck drives up, drops a hose, and pumps out the sludge. But in these dense, unregulated, informal settlements, the streets are unpaved, extremely narrow, and often built on steep inclines.
So a massive commercial vacuum truck physically cannot reach the homes.
Exactly. And even if they could, the cost of a specialized pumping service is completely out of reach for someone living in extreme poverty anyway.
So what actually happens when the pit is full and the truck can't come?
The community is forced to rely on manual pit emptiers.
Manual.
Yes. These are often unprotected, marginalized workers who are hired to climb into the pits with buckets and shovels to physically remove the raw sludge.
Oh my
And
God.
because there is no infrastructure to transport that waste to a treatment facility, they have no choice but to dump it into the nearest open space.
Which would be where?
They dump it into the municipal storm drains, into the local river, or simply in an empty lot.
Which takes us right back to the beginning of the cycle.
Yeah.
The untreated sewage just flows through the open gutters right past people's front doors.
Exactly.
And the UN report specifically notes that these inequalities are heavily compounded when sewage is discharged into storm drains, because gravity dictates that it all flows down into the poorest, most vulnerable, low-lying areas of the city.
Urban density makes the traditional latrine model fail entirely. But the UN Sustainable Development Goals report brings in a true wild card that threatens not just the informal settlements, but the highly engineered systems of the developed world as well.
Climate change.
Climate change. The report states that global water stress has held at 18% since 2015. 1 in 10 people on Earth are now living under high or critical water stress.
And the projections for the future are even more severe. The global urban population facing water scarcity is projected to double from 930 million people in 2016 to potentially 2.4 billion people by 2050.
It's massive, and climate change acts as an ultimate threat multiplier for sanitation infrastructure because modern sanitation is entirely dependent on reliable, abundant water.
Right, because we don't just use water to drink.
No, we use millions of gallons of it to flush toilets, to provide the hydraulic velocity needed to push solid waste miles down sewer pipes, and to operate the complex biological processes inside treatment plants.
So when water availability becomes radically unpredictable, the infrastructure fails.
Absolutely fails.
Let's talk about the mechanics of how a drought actually destroys a sewer system, because I hadn't thought about this. If a city is facing severe water scarcity and the municipal reservoir runs dry, what actually happens underground?
Well, if people don't have water to flush, or if they are aggressively conserving water, the flow inside the sewer mains drops dramatically.
Okay.
Sewer pipes are engineered with specific slopes, designed to use a steady flow of water to carry heavy solids along. Without that water volume, the solid waste stops moving.
It just sits there.
It settles at the bottom of the pipes, it dries out, it hardens, and causes massive blockages.
Oh.
And worse, the organic matter begins to rot inside the pipes, producing highly toxic and corrosive hydrogen sulfide gas.
Corrosive, like it damages the pipe.
It literally eats away at the concrete infrastructure. A multi-billion-dollar sewer system becomes a decaying, blocked subterranean hazard.
It is such a terrifying irony. I mean, we're simultaneously running out of water because of severe droughts, and yet in other parts of the world, we are drowning in water because of extreme floods.
Right.
And both extremes completely destroy our ability to manage our waste.
Flooding is catastrophic for both rural latrines and modern municipal sewers. Picture a coastal city or a community built on a floodplain. You might have a perfectly functioning, safely managed pit latrine or a household septic tank.
Yeah.
But when extreme flooding occurs or when sea levels rise, the groundwater table pushes upward. The water infiltrates the pits from below, filling them instantly.
And the contained human waste doesn't just stay put.
No, it breaches containment. The floodwaters wash the raw sewage out of the pits, into the streets, into people's living rooms, and across local agricultural fields. It literally brings all of our buried waste right back to the surface.
And this happens in major wealthy cities too, doesn't it?
It does, largely because of a design flaw known as a combined sewer overflow, or CSO.
Right.
In many older cities, the pipes that carry raw household sewage and the pipes that carry rainwater runoff from the streets are merged into one single pipe that heads to the treatment plant.
Okay, let me see if I can picture the mechanics of this. Imagine a massive bathtub representing the city's wastewater treatment plant. Usually the drain from the city is filling it at a manageable rate.
Okay.
But in a combined sewer system, the overflow drain, like the emergency release valve, is connected directly to the nearest river or ocean.
That's a very good way to look at it. On a
Right.
dry day, all the sewage goes to the plant, gets treated, and everything is fine.
But on a wet day,
When climate change delivers a massive, intense rainstorm dumping inches of rain in a matter of hours, millions of gallons of stormwater rush into those combined sewer grates. The volume of water instantly overwhelms the capacity of the pipes and the treatment plant.
The bathtub fills up too fast.
Exactly. And to prevent the sewage from backing up into people's homes and exploding out of their toilets, the system is designed to trigger those emergency release valves.
Which means
The mixture of stormwater and raw, untreated human sewage is dumped directly into the local rivers, lakes, and harbors. The reports explicitly state that the effects of climate change floods, water scarcity, sea level rise are setting back progress for billions of people and threaten to completely undermine existing services.
this raises a massive engineering challenge. I mean, how do we design sanitation for a future where water availability is entirely unpredictable? We can't rely on laying down billions of dollars of sewer pipes that need consistent rainfall if the rainfall stops.
We can't. We have to look toward off-grid solutions and dry sanitation. We need to engineer localized treatment systems that don't rely on massive amounts of water to transport waste miles away.
Like what?
Well, for example, modern composting toilets use biological processes to neutralize pathogens without a single drop of water.
Wait, how does a dry composting toilet actually neutralize the pathogens if there's no water to flush them away to a treatment plant?
It relies on aerobic decomposition and heat. A well-designed composting toilet often separates urine from solid waste. The solid waste drops into a ventilated chamber where the user adds a carbon-rich material like sawdust or ash. This creates the perfect carbon-to-nitrogen ratio for thermophilic bacteria, heat-loving bacteria to thrive.
And what do?
As these bacteria break down the organic matter, they generate significant heat, sometimes reaching temperatures over 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
130 degrees, just from bacteria.
Just from the bacteria. And that heat naturally cooks and destroys the dangerous pathogens and parasite eggs, leaving behind a safe, nutrient-rich compost.
So the infrastructure is crumbling where it exists. It's impossible to build traditional sewers in dense slums, and the climate is actively working against our water-reliant systems. We desperately need new technology like dry sanitation.
We really do.
But it paints a picture of a massive, bottomless money pit requiring trillions of dollars of investment.
It sounds like it.
But looking through the economic sections of these WHO and UN reports, you realize that treating waste isn't a money pit at all. In fact, investing in sanitation might be one of the most lucrative, high-yield investments a society can possibly make.
It absolutely is. It requires a paradigm shift. We have to stop seeing sanitation as a public burden and start seeing it as an economic engine.
Which is wild to think about.
The World Health Organization actually conducted a comprehensive study in 2012, and their economic modeling showed that for every $1 invested in sanitation, there is a $5.50 return to the local economy.
A 5.5 times return on investment.
Yes.
I mean, any venture capitalist on Wall Street would kill for those kinds of guaranteed systemic margins. How exactly does a toilet generate $5.50?
Well, return on investment comes in the form of massive societal savings and regained economic potential. First, you have a drastic reduction in direct healthcare costs because hospitals are no longer overflowing with patients suffering from preventable diarrheal diseases, cholera, and parasite infections.
Right, fewer sick people.
Second, you see a massive spike in adult productivity. When people aren't chronically ill, they don't miss weeks of work. Furthermore, parents aren't forced to stay home and lose their daily wages to care for sick children.
And if we look back at the stunting and educational impacts we discussed earlier, the long-term economic boost of keeping girls in school is enormous.
Unquantifiable, almost?
When you don't have to spend a significant portion of your nation's GDP constantly fighting off intestinal worms and waterborne epidemics, that capital can be invested in actual infrastructure, education, and growth.
Exactly. But the economic argument goes far beyond just saving money on healthcare and increasing labor productivity.
There's more.
Yes. The United Nations is pushing incredibly hard for a transition to a circular economy when it comes to human waste. And this requires fundamentally redefining what we believe human waste actually is.
The circular economy concept requires a bit of a mental leap for the average person, but the logic laid out in the reports is undeniable. We're basically flushing incredibly valuable resources down the drain.
We really are. The reports state that wastewater and fecal sludge are increasingly being viewed as commodities.
Commodities?
Yes. For the last century, the linear model of sanitation viewed human waste as a toxic hazard. The goal was simply to dispose of it, hide it away, or pump it into the ocean as quickly as possible.
Right.
But in a resource-constrained world, we have to look at the chemical composition of waste. It is a dense concentration of water, vital agricultural nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, and potential renewable energy.
Okay, let's talk about the phosphorus because that just blew my mind.
It's fascinating.
We currently spend massive amounts of energy mining phosphorus out of the ground in places like Morocco. We process it, we ship it globally to make synthetic agricultural fertilizer, we spread it on our fields to grow our food, we eat the food, process those nutrients through our bodies,
And then we flush that exact same phosphorus directly into the ocean.
and then we panic because the global supply of mineable phosphorus is running out.
It is an incredibly inefficient and destructive loop. In a circular economy, a modern wastewater treatment plant isn't just a disposal site, it operates as a resource recovery facility.
Resource recovery.
Yeah, you capture the wastewater and put it through advanced treatment processes, you filter out the solids and neutralize the pathogens. Then you can use the reclaimed clean water for agricultural irrigation, which is crucial for the water-stressed urban populations we talked about earlier.
And what happens to the solid sludge? How do we get the fertilizer and the energy out of it?
Through a process called anaerobic digestion, the solid sludge is pumped into massive, sealed, oxygen-free tanks called anaerobic digesters.
Okay.
Inside these tanks, specific microorganisms called methanogens break down the organic matter. As they digest the sludge, they release biogas, which is primarily composed of methane.
Ah, methane.
Yes, this methane can be captured, scrubbed, and burned to generate renewable electricity. Many advanced treatment plants generate enough electricity to completely power their own massive operations, and some even sell surplus power back to the municipal grid.
You are literally powering a city with the city's own waste.
It's incredible. And after the digestion process is complete, the remaining solid material called biosolids is rich in nitrogen and phosphorus.
So there's our fertilizer.
Exactly. Through chemical processes, facilities can precipitate out these nutrients to create safe, highly effective organic fertilizers, completely replacing the need for environmentally destructive synthetic fertilizers. You turn a biological hazard into clean water, food security, and renewable power.
But, and this is a big but, the reports highlight a massive, highly dangerous tightrope walk happening right now regarding the circular economy.
Yes, the informal reuse.
Right. The reuse of wastewater is already happening globally, but it is happening out of sheer desperation, and it is happening unsafely. The UN report dropped a statistic that completely floored me. In the year 2020, 44% of the household wastewater generated globally was discharged without safe treatment.
It's a terrifying number.
44% of all global wastewater.
Because water is so incredibly scarce, farmers located downstream from these dense urban areas are using whatever water they can get their hands on to keep their crops alive.
Yeah.
They are often pumping directly from rivers and canals that are heavily polluted with that untreated 44%. The report estimates that at least 10% of the world's population is currently consuming food that was irrigated by untreated or inadequately treated wastewater.
10% of the world. And that is the terrifying danger of an unstructured, unregulated circular economy. People are desperate for water, so they reuse it.
They don't have a choice.
But without the massive investments required to build treatment plants first, using raw wastewater on crops is just a highly efficient distribution system for disease.
Right.
You're essentially taking the cholera bacteria and the parasite eggs from a city's overflowing gutters and spraying them directly onto the vegetables that will be sold in the local market the very next day.
Which is why safe reuse, where the transmission of excreta-related disease is systematically prevented through proper, rigorous treatment protocols, is absolutely vital. We can maximize the economic and environmental benefits of the circular economy, but only if we invest the capital required to build the treatment technology first.
And the timeline to make those investments is shrinking rapidly. The United Nations has established the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs.
Right, SDG 6.
Target 6 specifically mandates clean water and sanitation for all by the year 2030. That means achieving universal, safely managed services globally in just a few short years. But the UN openly admits in these reports that at the current speed of infrastructure development, we will not achieve sustainable water management until at least 2049.
We are way behind schedule. To hit the 2030 goal for safely managed services, the UN calculates that the world needs to increase its historical rates of progress fivefold.
5 times faster.
A fivefold acceleration in global infrastructure development is a monumental, almost unprecedented task. It requires completely breaking down bureaucratic silos. The public health sector, the water utility sector, the environmental protection agencies, and the finance ministries all have to coordinate seamlessly.
It requires massive sector-wide investment capacity building in local governments, and a move toward that integrated, holistic approach to water management.
It also requires civil society organizations to hold their governments accountable for funding these unglamorous, invisible, underground projects. It
Yeah.
simply cannot be business as usual.
I was reading through the UN's World Water Day campaign materials, and they referenced an ancient tale to inspire action.
Oh, the hummingbird story.
Yes, it's the story of a hummingbird trying to put out a massive forest fire. The hummingbird is flying back and forth to the river, carrying one single drop of water in its beak at a time and dropping it on the flames while all the other bigger animals just stand around watching in despair.
Right.
And when they ask the hummingbird what it's doing, it replies, "I'm doing what I can."
It is a beautiful sentiment, and it encourages vital individual action, like fixing a leaky faucet, not wasting water, or being mindful of what you flush.
It is a beautiful sentiment, yeah. But when you look at the sheer mind-numbing scale of this crisis, 3.4 billion people without safe sanitation, 44% of global wastewater going untreated, the climate fundamentally altering water availability.
The hummingbird isn't enough.
It becomes painfully clear that while individual hygiene matters, we need a massive fleet of industrial helicopters dropping millions of gallons of fire retardant to put this out. We don't just need hummingbirds to hit that 2030 deadline. We need systemic, multi-trillion-dollar global transformation.
Absolutely. The burden of fixing this cannot rest solely on individuals conserving water in their homes. The burden rests squarely on national governments, international development banks, and the global community to view sanitation not as an expensive afterthought, but as the foundational infrastructure of a functional society.
Because without it, everything else fails.
Without safely managed sanitation, public health collapses, economic development stalls, and environmental resilience is destroyed.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the reports, it is incredibly clear that sanitation is the invisible thread that connects almost every major challenge humanity faces today.
It really is.
It connects acute global health crises to long-term childhood brain development. It connects gender equality and female education to climate resilience in coastal cities. And it connects basic human dignity to global economic growth. Everything is tied to how we manage our waste.
It truly is the ultimate reflection of our relationship with the ecosystem. We take resources from the earth, water, nitrogen, and phosphorus, and how we return those resources, whether as a toxic, untreated hazard that destroys communities, or as a treated, valuable resource that sustains them, dictates our survival on this planet.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over today. The next time you sit down for a meal, particularly a salad or fresh vegetables, consider that statistic. 10% of the world is eating food grown with untreated wastewater.
It's so rare.
And then turn that lens inward. Think about your own morning routine. Do you actually know where your own wastewater goes once it leaves your house?
Most people don't.
You push that silver button and it vanishes. But where does it travel? Is your local municipality actually treating it safely? Or during the next heavy rainstorm, is your local combined sewer system quietly overflowing, making your waste part of that 44% that silently returns to the environment, untreated and dangerous?
It is a profound mechanical question to ask yourself. The illusion of the flush is incredibly comforting, but true sustainability requires us to actually follow the pipes and understand the systems we rely on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the invisible world of water and sanitation. True learning means pulling back the curtain on the things we take for granted, and I hope you will never look at a simple flush the same way again. Stay curious. Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.